I'm 58 years old, been through hell in Vietnam and 35 years of construction work, but nothing prepared me for what I found when I came home that September night. The sound coming from my basement still wakes me up at 3 a.m. It was my wife Barbara, and she was dying. Let me back up a bit. My name is Gordon Davis. I've lived in Phoenix for the better part of 30 years, built a decent life here after the war. Worked my way up from swinging a hammer to running construction crews for some of the biggest projects in the valley. Barbara and we've been married 34 years. Good years, mostly. She's 56, used to be sharper than a tack until this damn Alzheimer's started creeping in 2 years ago. Now you have to understand something about early onset Alzheimer's. It's not like the movies where someone just forgets your name one day. It comes in waves. Barbara might forget where she put her keys, but she'll remember every detail about our first date. She might get confused about what year it is, but she knows exactly how I like my coffee. It's cruel that way. We've got one daughter, Lisa. She's 35, works as a CPA at some firm in Scottsdale. Smart as hell with numbers, always has been. Married this guy, Anthony, about 4 years back. Now, I've tried to like Anthony, I really have. But there's something about a man who calls himself a business consultant, but can't explain what business he's consulting on, that rubs me wrong. He's always got some scheme going, cryptocurrency this, blockchain that, passive income streams, you know the type. The trouble started 2 weeks ago when my sister called from Denver at 3 in the morning. Mom had suffered a stroke. She's 82, tough as nails, but a stroke at that age. Well, you don't take chances. I was on the first flight out that morning. Here's where I made my mistake. I was panicking about Mom, worried sick, and when Lisa offered to stay with Barbara while I was gone, I jumped at it. "Dad, don't worry about a thing," she said. "I'll take care of Mom. You just focus on Grandma." It seemed like a blessing. Lisa knew Barbara's routines, knew her medications, knew how to handle the confusion when it hit. For the first week in Denver, everything seemed fine. I called home every day, sometimes twice. Lisa always answered, always had good news. "Mom's doing great, Dad. We watched her stories today. She helped me make dinner." Little things like that. It made me feel better about being 800 miles away while my mother fought for her life in a Denver hospital bed. But during the second week, things changed. Suddenly, Lisa wasn't answering the phone anymore. I'd get voicemail, then a text an hour later. "Sorry, busy with Mom. She's good. Call you later." But she never called back. When I tried calling Barbara directly, her phone went straight to voicemail too. Now, you have to understand, I'm not the paranoid type. I spent 2 tours in Vietnam, ran construction sites with million-dollar budgets and crews full of ex-cons and college boys. I know when something's off. But I told myself I was being stupid. Lisa had it under control. Mom needed me. Barbara was in good hands. That was the biggest mistake of my life. Mom pulled through, thank God. Faster recovery than anyone expected. The doctor said I could head home 3 days earlier than planned, so I grabbed the first flight out of Denver. I was exhausted, hadn't slept right in 2 weeks, living on hospital coffee and vending machine sandwiches. All I wanted was to get home to Barbara, to hold her, to make sure she was okay. I pulled into our driveway in Ahwatukee around 8 p.m. The house was completely dark. That should have been my first clue. Barbara always kept the living room lights on, especially when she was confused about the time. It was one of the routines we'd established to help with her condition. I grabbed my duffel bag from the truck and headed for the front door, fishing for my keys. That's when I heard it. A faint sound, like someone tapping on pipes deep in the walls. But as I got closer to the house, I realized it wasn't pipes at all. Someone was banging on something, desperate and rhythmic, and there was a voice underneath it. Weak, hoarse, but definitely human. My blood went cold. I jammed the key in the lock and burst through the front door. The banging got louder, more frantic, and now I could tell exactly where it was coming from. The basement. Someone was in our basement, pounding on something and crying. I ran to the basement door, and my heart nearly stopped. There was a heavy-duty padlock on it, a padlock I'd never seen before in my life. Someone had locked the basement from the outside. "Barbara!" I shouted, my hands already shaking as I grabbed the crowbar from my toolbox in the hall closet. The crying got louder from below. Weaker, but definitely Barbara's voice. I pried that lock off in 3 violent yanks, adrenaline giving me strength I didn't know I still had. The door swung open and the smell hit me like a physical blow. Urine, sweat, and something else. Something that told me Barbara had been down there for a long, long time. I flicked on the basement light and nearly collapsed. My wife was at the bottom of the stairs, curled up on the concrete floor in a filthy nightgown. She was skeletal, her face gaunt and hollow. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. When she looked up at me, there was a moment, just a split second, where she didn't recognize me at all. "Gordon?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Is that really you? Or am I dreaming again?" I was down those stairs in seconds. I scooped Barbara into my arms and she weighed nothing. Nothing. This woman who used to help me move furniture, who could carry bags of groceries up 2 flights of stairs without breaking a sweat, felt like a child in my arms. Her skin was cold and clammy, and when she tried to speak, her voice cracked like old leather. "How long?" she whispered. "How long have I been down here?" I couldn't answer her. Hell, I didn't even know myself yet. All I knew was that my wife had been locked in our basement like an animal, and our daughter was supposed to be taking care of her. I carried Barbara upstairs and laid her on the couch. The living room looked different somehow. Furniture had been moved around. There were boxes stacked in the corner that I'd never seen before. Barbara's pill organizer was gone from the kitchen counter where it had sat every day for the past 2 years. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely dial 911. When the dispatcher asked what my emergency was, I didn't even know where to start. "My wife," I said. "She's been locked in our basement. I don't know how long. She's in bad shape." The paramedics arrived in maybe 8 minutes, but it felt like 8 hours. While we waited, I tried to get Barbara to drink some water, but she could barely hold the glass. She kept looking around the room like she didn't recognize it. "Where's Lisa?" she asked. "She was just here. She was making me lunch." "No, sweetheart," I said. And that's when it really hit me. Lisa had done this. My daughter had locked her own mother in a basement. "Lisa's not here." When the EMTs came through the door, they took one look at Barbara and went into full emergency mode. Severe dehydration, they said, malnourishment, early signs of hypothermia even though it was September in Arizona. One of them, a young guy who couldn't have been more than 25, pulled me aside. "Sir, when did you last see your wife?" 2 weeks ago. I was in Denver. My mother had a stroke. My daughter was supposed to be staying with her." The paramedic exchanged a look with his partner. I could see what they were thinking. 2 weeks. Barbara had been down there for 2 weeks. I rode with Barbara in the ambulance to Phoenix General, holding her hand and trying not to think about what those 2 weeks must have been like for her. The confusion, the fear, sitting in the dark, wondering why nobody was coming to help her. Barbara has Alzheimer's, but she's not gone yet. She knew something was wrong. She knew she was trapped. At the hospital, they whisked Barbara away to the ER while I sat in the waiting room trying to make sense of what had happened. That's when Detective Russell showed up. Phoenix PD Elder Abuse Unit. Apparently, the hospital has to call them automatically when something like this comes in. Detective Russell was a straight shooter, maybe 45. Looked like he'd seen his share of family horror stories. He sat down across from me in those uncomfortable plastic chairs and opened his notebook. "Mr. Davis, I need you to walk me through the last 2 weeks." So I did. I told him about Mom's stroke, about the panic, about Lisa volunteering to stay with Barbara. I told him about the phone calls the first week, how everything seemed normal. Then about the second week, how Lisa stopped answering, how she'd only text. "During those 2 weeks," Russell asked, "did you give your daughter power of attorney over your wife's affairs?" "No, absolutely not. Why would I do that?" "Did your wife sign any documents that you're aware of?" "Not that I know of. Lisa handles her own finances. We handle ours." Russell closed his notebook. "Mr. Davis, what we're looking at here isn't just neglect. The padlock, the condition we found your wife in, the fact that your daughter was supposed to be caring for her. This has the hallmarks of intentional confinement. Possibly financial exploitation, too. We're going to need to search your house." Financial exploitation. That phrase hit me like a punch to the gut. "You think Lisa stole from us?" "I don't know yet, but we're going to find out." Barbara spent 3 days in the hospital. They had to rehydrate her slowly, treat her for malnutrition, run a battery of tests to make sure the confinement hadn't caused any permanent damage. Physically, she'd recover. Mentally, though, the trauma had made her Alzheimer's worse. She was more confused, more agitated. She kept asking for Lisa. "Where's my daughter?" she'd ask me. "Why hasn't she come to see me?" How do you explain to someone with Alzheimer's that their daughter is a monster? That the person she trusted most in the world had betrayed her in the worst possible way? I couldn't do it, so I'd just hold her hand and say, "She's busy right now, sweetheart, but I'm here." On the second day, while Barbara was sleeping, I went home with Detective Russell and 2 other officers to look at the crime scene. That's what they called it now, a crime scene. Walking back into that basement was one of the hardest things I've ever done. In the corner, there was a bucket. That's what Barbara had been forced to use as a toilet. There was a thin blanket on the concrete floor, the only comfort she'd had for 2 weeks. The light bulb had been removed from the socket, so she'd been sitting in complete darkness most of the time. But here's what really got to me. On the walls, at about the height where Barbara would have been sitting, there were scratch marks, fingernail scratches where she'd tried to claw her way out. My wife, confused and scared, had spent 2 weeks in the dark trying to escape from her own basement. Detective Russell was taking photos of everything when his phone rang. When he hung up, his expression was grim. "Mr. Davis, we need to look at your financial accounts, and we need to look at them right now." "Why? What's wrong?" "Your daughter and son-in-law just tried to board a flight to Miami. TSA flagged them. They had one-way tickets and $30,000 in cash." That's when I knew. Whatever Lisa had done, whatever she'd stolen from us, she was trying to run. They arrested Lisa and Anthony at Sky Harbor Airport. TSA had flagged them for the cash, but when Detective Russell ran their names through the system, he found they were already persons of interest in an elder abuse investigation. The timing was too convenient. My wife locked in a basement, my daughter trying to flee the country with $30,000 in cash. Even a rookie cop would have connected those dots. Russell called me from the airport. "We've got them in custody, Mr. Davis, but I need you to come down to the station. We need to go through your financial records, and we need to do it tonight." I spent the next 6 hours at the Phoenix PD headquarters going through bank statements, investment accounts, everything Barbara and I had worked 35 years to build. What I found made me want to put my fist through the wall. See, here's what you need to understand about retirement money when you're my age. That's not just savings sitting in a bank account. That's your life. That's every overtime shift I worked when Lisa was in college, every vacation we didn't take so we could put money away, every dinner out we skipped to build our nest egg. When you're 58 years old, you don't get a do-over if someone steals your retirement. Lisa had taken everything. She'd somehow gotten access to our savings account and withdrawn $95,000. $95,000. Gone. She'd also taken out a home equity line of credit against our house for another $60,000. A house we'd owned free and clear for 15 years. Now we owed the bank $60,000, and I had no idea how. "How is this possible?" I asked Detective Russell. "Barbara and I are the only ones on these accounts." That's when he showed me the power of attorney documents. Forged, but legal enough to fool the bank. Someone had taken Barbara to a notary. Some sketchy operation in Glendale that apparently didn't ask too many questions. And had her sign papers giving Lisa control over our finances. "Your wife has Alzheimer's, Mr. Davis. On a good day, she might not remember signing these. On a bad day, she might not even understand what she was signing." The documents were dated 3 days after I'd left for Denver. Lisa had wasted no time. But here's the part that really got me, the part that still makes my blood boil when I think about it. They couldn't let Barbara talk to me during those 2 weeks. If I'd called the house and spoken to Barbara directly, she would have told me something was wrong. Even with her condition, she'd know if strangers were in the house, if someone was forcing her to sign papers if her routine was disrupted. So they had to keep her quiet. Their solution? Lock her in the basement. Detective Russell had impounded Lisa's laptop from their condo, and with a search warrant, we went through everything. What we found was a step-by-step plan to steal our life savings. Lisa had been researching power of attorney laws, elder exploitation, even countries with favorable extradition policies. This wasn't some desperate last-minute grab for cash. This was calculated theft. And where did all that money go? Into something called Desert Capital Management. Took me about 5 minutes of Googling to figure out that Desert Capital was Anthony's company, a shell corporation he'd registered 6 months earlier with the state of Arizona. Its business purpose? Cryptocurrency investment and blockchain consulting. In other words, a scam. But wait, it gets worse. Anthony wasn't just stealing from us. He was running a full-blown Ponzi scheme, targeting elderly investors throughout the Phoenix area. He'd taken money from at least 25 other people, promising 40% returns on cryptocurrency trades that never happened. He was just moving money around, paying early investors with new investor money to keep the scheme alive. Lisa wasn't just his wife, she was his business partner. Her accounting credentials gave legitimacy to the operation. She'd helped him create fake financial statements, had recruited 2 of her own co-workers from the CPA firm to invest their retirement savings. She knew exactly what they were doing. The text messages between them were the smoking gun. Detective Russell showed them to me on his computer screen. Anthony, she keeps asking for your dad. This isn't working. Lisa, she'll forget. The confusion helps. Give it another day. Anthony, what if someone calls the house? Lisa, who's going to call? Dad's in Denver dealing with Grandma. Mom's friend stopped visiting months ago because of the Alzheimer's. We're safe. They'd planned it all out. They knew I'd be in Denver for at least 2 weeks. They knew Barbara's condition made her vulnerable. They knew exactly how to exploit both situations for maximum profit. The Costa Rica connection made sense too. They weren't just planning to disappear with our money. They were planning to set up permanent residence in a country that doesn't extradite for financial crimes. If I hadn't come home early, if Barbara had died in that basement, which she very well might have, Lisa and Anthony would have played the grieving daughter and son-in-law, collected whatever life insurance money was available, and been on a plane to San Jose before anyone started asking questions. Here's what really gets me about the whole thing. Lisa grew up in our house. She knew every inch of that basement. She knew how cold it gets down there at night. She knew there was no bathroom, no running water, no way to call for help. She locked her own mother in that space, knowing exactly what it would do to her. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Helen Young, laid out the charges the next morning. Elder abuse, financial exploitation, unlawful confinement, fraud, forgery. They threw the book at both of them. Anthony faced additional charges related to the Ponzi scheme. Mr. Davis, Helen told me, this is one of the most premeditated elder abuse cases I've ever prosecuted. Your daughter didn't just steal your money, she tortured your wife to do it. The arraignment was 2 days later. I sat in the back of the courtroom and watched my daughter plead not guilty to charges that could put her away for 15 years. She tried to make eye contact with me, tried to mouth the word sorry. I stood up and walked out. The trial took 8 months to get to court. 8 months of living with the knowledge that my own daughter had tried to kill my wife for money. 8 months of watching Barbara's condition worsen because trauma accelerates Alzheimer's. That's what the neurologist told me. The stress of those 2 weeks in the basement had stolen months, maybe years from whatever time we had left together. Anthony took a plea deal, cowered threw Lisa under the bus to save his own skin, agreed to testify against her in exchange for 8 years instead of 15. He claimed Lisa was the mastermind, that she'd planned everything and he'd just gone along with it. The evidence backed him up too. Lisa's computer showed she'd been researching elder abuse laws and power of attorney procedures weeks before my mother's stroke. She'd planned this whole thing. When Lisa's trial started, I testified for 3 hours. Had to walk that courtroom through finding Barbara in the basement, through discovering the financial theft, through realizing my daughter had been willing to let her mother die for money. The hardest part was when they showed the jury photos of the basement, that bucket in the corner, the scratch marks on the walls where Barbara had tried to claw her way out. 2 jurors were crying. Lisa's defense attorney tried to paint her as a victim too, said Anthony had manipulated her, that she was desperate financially, that she'd never meant for things to go as far as they did. The prosecutor, Helen Young, destroyed that argument on cross-examination. Miss Davis, Helen said, showing Lisa her own text messages, you wrote to your husband, she'll forget, the confusion helps. You were referring to your mother's Alzheimer's, weren't you? Silence. Miss Davis, you locked your mother in a basement without food or water for 14 days. You stole her life savings. You planned to flee the country, and you want this jury to believe you never meant to hurt anyone? Lisa broke down crying on the stand. Didn't matter. The jury saw right through it, deliberated for 4 hours, guilty on all counts. At sentencing, I read a victim impact statement, told the judge about Barbara's worsening condition, about the financial devastation, about how Lisa had stolen not just our money, but our time together. Barbara tried to write one too, but her Alzheimer's made it impossible. Her doctor submitted a letter instead, explaining how the trauma had accelerated her cognitive decline. The judge didn't mess around. Miss Davis, you exploited your mother's vulnerability without conscience. You betrayed every standard of human decency. 12 years in federal prison. Anthony got his 8 years. Now here's the part that really stings. The money? We'll never see it. Anthony's Ponzi scheme collapsed, and the money was gone. Spent on their lifestyle, moved offshore, paid to early investors to keep the scam running. The restitution orders are just paper. You can't squeeze blood from a stone. We had to refinance our house to cover the home equity line of credit Lisa had taken out. For the first time in 15 years, we have mortgage payments again. At 58, I'm supposed to be planning retirement, not figuring out how to pay off a house I already owned. Barbara's care costs keep climbing as her condition worsens. Insurance covers some of it, but not the kind of specialized care she needs. We're looking at maybe selling the house in a few years to afford memory care. The house we bought when Lisa was 3 years old, where we planned to spend our golden years together. Lisa's serving her time at a women's prison in Tucson. She'll be eligible for parole in 8 years when she's 43. Anthony's at a facility near Florence. I haven't visited either one. I won't. As far as I'm concerned, I don't have a daughter anymore. People ask me sometimes if I regret pushing for the maximum sentence, if I think 12 years is too harsh for family. Here's what I tell them. Lisa locked her confused, terrified mother in a basement for 2 weeks. She stole everything we'd worked 35 years to build. She was willing to let Barbara die for money. 12 years isn't too harsh. It's mercy. Barbara doesn't understand where Lisa is anymore. Sometimes she still asks, but less often now. Last month she forgot who I was for the first time. Just looked at me like I was a stranger and asked what I was doing in her house. It only lasted about an hour, but it's starting. The final phase. Here's what I want you to understand if you're a man my age, someone who's worked his whole life and trusted his family. We built everything believing our kids would take care of us, not destroy us. We saved every penny thinking we were building a legacy, not funding our own destruction. If you've got adult children pushing for financial control, asking about your will, wanting access to your accounts, trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't make the mistake I made of assuming blood means loyalty. Some people see their aging parents as nothing but dollar signs. Get your legal documents in order, but keep control of them yourself. Don't sign anything you don't understand, even if your own kids are pressuring you. And for God's sake, if you've got a spouse with dementia or Alzheimer's, never leave them alone with someone you have even the slightest doubt about. Barbara and I learned the hard way that sometimes the people closest to you are the most dangerous. We trusted Lisa because she was our daughter. That trust nearly killed my wife and destroyed our future. The scratch marks on that basement wall still haunt me. My Barbara, confused and scared, spending 2 weeks in the dark trying to escape from her own home. That's what uncontrolled greed does to families. That's what happens when people stop seeing their parents as human beings and start seeing them as resources to exploit. Lisa will get out of prison eventually. She'll rebuild her life, maybe start over somewhere else. But Barbara and I, we don't get a fresh start. We don't get those stolen years back. We don't get to retire with dignity or leave something meaningful for our grandchildren. The only justice that matters is the knowledge that we held them accountable, that we didn't let them get away with destroying an innocent woman's life for money. And maybe, just maybe, our story will help someone else recognize the warning signs before it's too late. Trust your family, but verify everything. Love your children, but protect yourself. Because sometimes the greatest threat to your golden years isn't age or illness. It's the people you raise to love and respect you. That's the lesson Barbara and I learned in the cruelest way possible. I'm sharing it with you so maybe you won't have to learn it the same way we did.